special keynote speaker, Noel Pearson, hosted by Queensland African Community Council, to be moderated by President BENY OAM. My name is Louis Lee. I'm your MC for this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, Uncle Barry Watson wouldn't be able to come today. He's the chair of the QUEENSLAND Advisory Board. I now read the statement prepared by Uncle Barry Watson, the acknowledgement of the country. Ladies and gentlemen, Uncle Barry Watson wouldn't be able to come today. He's the chair of the QUEENSLAND Advisory Board. I now read the statement prepared by Uncle Barry Watson, the acknowledgement of the country. Jinji Walu Walu Jin, good evening and welcome, Noel Pearson. My name is Uncle Barry and I'm the descendant of Waika people of the Western Victoria. Tonight we are meeting on the land of the European King of the Yurunga Nation, which run from Weber Dam along the Brisbane River to Moreton Bay, then follow to the coast to the Victoria Point, then along to the north bank of the Northern River of the foothill of the range. We pay our respect to the Yurunga people and their neighbours and the tribal on the other side of the Brisbane River and Yukon Bay on the south side of the Logan River and surrounding people from Moreton Bay Island. Extend that respect to our First Nation people from Strawberry Island to Broome and from Tasmania to the Torres Strait. We acknowledge the important role and the responsibility of the elders, past, present, and future, in passing down their wisdom and knowledge for the benefit of us all. Muruka is the Yugra word for the hardwood trees, and we encourage our youth to be strong and resilient young people so that they can be safe from the pressure they attack from every day, like racism, discrimination, poverty, high unemployment, and low economic status, which lead to many of the life of crime, drug, alcohol, and violence. Brisbane was one known as Minji, and the river called Mewa, which means the old brown snake. King Mini Pai was the leader of the local people who came where the Gaba Stadium is today. They would chase the kangaroo towards the river where the Story Bridge now stands, and they now know where to go, so they were easy picking, and that's why it's called Kangaroo Point. This time of the year, we celebrate the important day where the government apologies to our people for taking the children away and putting them in institution and placing them with the white Australian. And they are known as the stolen generation, and that tremor of the celebration and loneliness have been passed down from generation to generation. Besides Sorry Day, we also recently celebrated Marble Day, where a group of Torres Strait Islanders went to the High Court in Canberra, successfully claim our land and see and right for future generation. We also celebrate the Reconciliation Week, where we can come together and unite in forgiveness for the past atrocity and injustice which so greatly affected our people to make feel like refugees in their country. The First Nation representative on the Queensland African Community Council Advisory Board, and proud to work with the African brother and sister to establish and maintain 3 African villages to run the youth program for the refugees and First Nation young people who are overrepresented in the juvenile justice system due to unresolved and intergeneration trauma of the horrified events of the past. We welcome here tonight, know and honor and respect you for the fighting stand on advancing on the well-being of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people all over the country. QSCC lead in full support to you and First Nation people in the campaign for the recognition in the Australian Constitution in the upcoming referendum in accordance to the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Thank you for your visit tonight, and we stand in unity with you in the fight for self-determination for the First Nation people. These are the statements from the Uncle Barry Watson. Ladies and gentlemen, I do the acknowledgement of the dignitary. First, can I acknowledge BENY, the President of QUEENSLAND and Senior Manager of the Youth Engagement and Community Partnership of QUEENSLAND and member of the Ministry, Queensland Multicultural Affairs Council and Youth Justice Strategic Advice Committee. And our keynote speaker, Noel Pearson, the keynote speaker, founder and director of strategy of the Cape York Partnership and founder of the Good to Great School Australia, member of expert panel on the Constitution Recognition of Indigenous Australian and Referendum Council. And Brett Chilcote, AM founder and director of the Welcoming Australia. Dr. Ignatius Corregules, the senior lecturer of QUT and former co-CEO of QUEENSLAnd. And Jamila Pahi, the former co-CEO of QUEENSLAnd. And Professor Keithia Wilson, the chair of QUEENSLAnd board, and her partner, my good friend, Professor Al Lisio. Thank you for your attention. And Christine Casley, the CEO for Multicultural Australia. Liz Golden, the co-CEO of QUEENSLAnd, and Sally Stewart, co-CEO of QUEENSLAnd. And Gail Kurt OAM, the member of the QACC Advisory Board and coordinator of Tri Logan at the Social Policy Group. And Auntie Janet Dim OAM, the president of the Queensland Multicultural Council, and Peter Low OAM, the honorary president of the Queensland Chinese Forum and honorary president of the Australian Queensland Fujian Association, and also Anut Nanuru, president of the Federation of Indian Community Queensland, and Vicky E, the past president of the QCF, and also the fundraising chair of the SCCMC, and Dr. Ray Mohan, the advisor of FICQ, the director of the Australian Indian News, Multicultural Australian News, and also the managing director of Star Promotion. Amrita Dispai, the community news editor, and Kate Byung, the assistant executive director at the Westmoreton Youth Detention Center. Michael Gruza, the senior manager for the community service at Multilink Community Service. Mick Kane, the manager at the Woolstone Corrective Service. And Habib Jamal, the president of Queensland Muslim Incorporated, and also the secretary of the QACC Advisory Board. Faisal Ahmad Silek, the president of Somalia Community of Queensland, also the QACC committee. And Sibit Ramban, the president of South Sudanese Community Council Association, also QACC committee. Future Fedalis, the president of Congolese Community Association, also QACC committee. Dr. Sababu Kaitira, the president of the Tanzania Community Association, the QACC committee. Dr. Wanda Chimoyo, the president of Zimbabwe Community in Queensland, also a QACC committee member. And I saw Dr. J.D. Gupta from the Bangladesh community. Even though it's not on the list, I will read out your name. Michelle Linda for Hawaii, president of Liberian Community Association, also the QACC committee. Blessing again, the president of Nigerian Community Association, and also QACC committee. Savannah Rio, the secretary of the Kemal Buddhist Society of Queensland. Alan Chen, president UMIA, and also Jane Wan, the secretary, and Simon Tang, the chairman of the SCCMC, and Ju Hee Pa, the president of Southside Migrant Association. Dikani Hassan, the member of QACC Advisory Board. Dr. Nasi Yukut, the president of Sudanese Community Crisis Management Committee, also a QACC committee. Mama Saba Abraham, the president of Eurasian Community Women Welfare Association and founder and director of Moose Restaurant, and Sharon Orapile, the former president of QACC, and Dr. Ray Mohan, the founder and director of Multicultural News, and Peter John, the president of the Rotary Club Sunnybank, and Rebecca Zhang, the president of Meister Association, and Charlie Palau, the president of Samoa Community in Brisbane North, and James In, and Cruz Juan, and Cheryl Juan, and also all the QACC committee member and youth mentor from the African Youth Support Council. Ladies and gentlemen, if I miss out anyone, sincere apologies. I will take full responsibility for it. It was not a long list, but I'll take full responsibility of it. Ladies and gentlemen, next I would like to invite the host, BENY Boy OAM, the president of the Queensland African Community Council, to do the opening remarks.
I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathering today. I pay my respect to the elders, both past, present, and emerging. I want to pay my respect to the elders who are here today from all different cultural backgrounds, and welcome to the African Village. Good to have you. I don't want to take too much time without going through the reason why we're here today. So I'm very happy, very honored to see all of you, the leaders from all different cultural backgrounds, from different service providers. This is what I've been looking for a very long time, something that we can host at the place of cultural significance, so in the community, so led and owned by the community. I want to mention a couple of things why I personally decided to invite you to come and meet with our people and multicultural communities. Number one, I've been following you for many years. I've been reading about you, I've been reading your articles, and I've been watching you on the news. And when I started my university in 2009, I did a lot of research on closing the gap. And since that time up to now, the gap has never been closed. And it has never been closed because the power has never been given to the people that we call our First Nations. And it is very important for us as leaders and advocates from multicultural communities to actually reflect and think about the importance of this, because we are doing it for ourselves as well. Every single day, every one of you in this room, we make a lot of noise talking about community empowerment. We need to empower communities because we know that if you empower the person, you build the relationship and trust with the people, then you can achieve an outcome. So we cannot talk about solving the problem without empowering people. They have to be at the table where decisions are made. They need to be consulted. That's what we talk about every day. That's the noise we make as multicultural community leaders, that we need to empower local communities. So in 2019, I'm going to talk about something probably I didn't give you further warning about this. 2018, 2019, our young people made news, the African young people, and people talk about them everywhere. And in 2019, in January, Noel wrote an article, and it was published in the Australian newspaper. I read that article, and I wanted to meet with him to talk about his words, because I was also on the news everywhere. And I'm going to try to go through a few paragraphs so you can actually hear what he's written in 2019. So he was talking more about debate between the left and the right, the identity politics. And then he addressed three aspects of that in terms of multiculturalism and also a bit of African youth in particular, and also the Indigenous people. And some of the words were like, strong societies are made up of strong bonding identities and strong bonding identities. When ideologues and culture war prosecutors from the left and right argue their take on singular identities must be paramount, identities are raised as bulwarks against opposing identities and our shared nationality. Identity fundamentalism takes two forms. The first demands we are all the same. There should be no recognition of difference, no recognition of rights that have been denied to groups, because our liberal democracy is color, gender, and sexuality blind. And groups that seek to remedy injustice should just suck it up and pay obeisance to the one nation. The second demands that we are all different and our identity blocks are islands of exclusive indignation within society, and diversity is more important than unity. What distinguishes us should prevail over our common bond. So this conception of identity as singular is common in both forms of fundamentalism. They do not admit the truth that we have multiple identities, even as individuals. We have layers of identity that bind us to communities close to us and to friends unknown across the nations. There is nothing to be gained from trying to hector people to deny a layer of their identity in the name of shared nationhood, especially if that identity has been denied dignity and respect. Similarly, there is nothing to be gained from making one part of our identity the only thing that matters, and in the process denying and degrading other part, not least our common citizenship. So he went on and says, Australian identity crises are playing out in the absence of leadership. And I'll say a few things here. First, take the issue of problems involving migrant youth of African descent. These youths are Australians, not Africans. They have a heritage in Africa, but they are our Australian youth. Let us stop calling them Africans. Call them African Australians or Australian of African descent, or just Australians, because these are our young people and they are part of our future. Let's not deny the challenges faced by these youth and their communities, in the same way as we should never sweep the problems of Aboriginal and communities under the carpet and deny the particular challenges my mob faces. He asked, when will a white Australian political leader own these youth as our own and squarely face the challenges they endure and make clear of the high expectation their country has of them, that they have rights and responsibilities as surely as everyone. Traditional formula of tolerance and goodwill that underpin the great success of our multicultural migration has been that we find unity in diversity. Let us not trash our achievement by trying to demonize multiculturalism as bad source of identity fundamentalism. So the concluding word that I took here is that inclusion and respect can never be achieved if it is replaced by exclusion and rejection. So I've been keeping this article for a number of years, and I put some of them in my book, as some reference, because in many ways I've found some commonalities between you and myself. I've been watching people attacking you everywhere because of what you believe in, the values and what you fight for your people. And you have been so resilient and strong, and you want to move on and get the right thing for your people. You tell the truth as it is, and people will know the truth will prevail. So we are very privileged to have you here as multicultural communities, and you can see the room, these people from all different backgrounds, and people who believe in us. And we want to work together to empower your people, our people, and we will be a better society because of the recognition of your people in the Constitution. You are welcome.
Let me acknowledge the Yagara and Turrbal peoples and the elders past and present. Let me acknowledge elders from all of our communities. I really want to thank the Council for this opportunity to start our campaign here with the ethnic communities of Brisbane. The legislation setting up the referendum will pass the Senate next week, and we're into a long campaign with the referendum date being sometime in October. I want to thank BENY for his remarks and giving me an opportunity to talk about what might be underlying the campaign for recognition. Australia is going to change when we have constitutional recognition. The country will change from being a settler society. Australia has thought of itself up until now as a settler society. And a settler society sets up a group of people as the rightful settlers of the country and natives. And the natives are treated in a certain way and are relegated to homelands in a certain way, and often invariably discriminated against in a certain way. This is the story of the planet all over. But we want to change that. We want to move beyond settler Australia. We want a new Australia. And to get to that new Australia is going to be a bit of a struggle. We're going to have to change the way we think. We're going to have to reach for the future and define a new Australia. I've been thinking a lot about what that new Australia might look like. Because I often ask myself, what is Australia? And who are the Australians? And my very simple idea, which I think is just a statement of reality rather than anything else, I think we're a country with three stories. These stories stare us in the face, but we have hitherto not acknowledged all of them. And we certainly haven't brought those three stories together. The first part of our story has to be the long Indigenous heritage of the country, which science tells us goes back 60,000 millennia. Ever since, according to the science, we came out of Africa and crossed the Torres land bridge. We walked across the land bridge from PNG and occupied Australia 60,000 plus years ago. This country has had an Indigenous heritage of its Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. That's the first reality. Come on. Australia's not 235 years old. And yet, the answer of what is Australia that we most often give is an answer about 235 years. It is not an answer about the balance of the 50,000 plus years. So facing up, acknowledging the Indigenous heritage of Australia has got to be part of the answer of what Australia is and who the Australians are. And with this referendum, we're going to secure recognition of that first part. We didn't do it in 1770. We didn't do it in 1788. We didn't do it in 1901. We didn't do it in 1967. And we didn't do it in 2001. We just haven't done it. So let's do it. And we have the best opportunity to do it in the basic law of our country, which is the Constitution. The second part of Australia is our British institutions. We are a country whose institutions have their provenance in Britain. Those institutions inure for the benefit of all of us. There's no need and there's no sense in repudiating those institutions. They are part of our democracy. They're ingrained in our society. They exist for the benefit of all of us. Australia does have British institutions as part of the society that's been built on this Indigenous continent. The third part of our Australian story is the multicultural gift and triumph. Very few nations on the face of the earth have done it as well as we have. We have many shortcomings. We have many challenges to overcome. We are not perfect, and we need to do better. But as far as such a diverse group of peoples living together in relative harmony, multiculturalism has been a great triumph for Australia. And it's the third part of our story. So in answer to the question, what is Australia and who are the Australians? I say, it's the Indigenous foundations. It's the British institutions. And it's the multicultural triumph. That's what Australia is. That multicultural triumph means that there are no provisional Australians. There's no P-plate Australians. There's no learner plate Australians. They're only Australians. African Australians are Australians. You're as Australian as anybody else. Chinese Australians are Australians. They're as Australian as anybody else. The new Australia we will reach forward to is not an Australia that somehow says the settlers are the only ones and the others who have come after them have some kind of qualified status or provisional status. We're going to move beyond that old Australia and that old idea. I am absolutely convinced that we have to do this now. Our communities, and particularly our traditional communities, are in such parlous and perilous conditions. They need a very clear message. They need a message from the Constitution of the country that they can be themselves and be Australian. They need to be allowed, in the words of one of our great elders from Arnhem Land, a modern version of themselves. That's what they want, and that's what this country has unequivocally got to allow them to be. To define a modern version of themselves and to take a place in the mainstream of the country. Not in marginal homelands, out of sight, out of mind, but in the mainframe of the country. There's a passage in the Uluru Statement from the Heart that speaks to three things that I urge you to think about. This is what the Uluru Statement said in 2017. Proportionally, we're the most incarcerated people on the planet. North America gives us a pretty stern competition in imprisoning black people. But proportionally, Australia is worse. The rates of imprisonment of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are worse than the very bad proportions in North America. We are not an innately criminal people. Our children are alienated from their families at unprecedented rates, and this cannot be because we have no love for them. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children will soon comprise more than 50% of children in out-of-home care in Queensland. We're on the cusp of turning from 49 across to the other side. Four percent of the state are contributing almost 50% of the children in out-of-home care. And yet we hear those numbers year in, year out, and there's no particular alarm about it. There's an assumption that somehow this is to be expected. People in government and the senior levels of bureaucracy think, well, yeah, it is bad, but it's kind of expected of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that they should make up the numbers, half of the numbers of children in out-of-home care. They have, the bureaucracy and the politicians have no memory of what existed 50 years ago. From my home community, there was no one in jail when I was a child. When I was a child, there was no one in out-of-home care. Let's talk about juvenile detention, which is an issue facing our African Australian communities. Our youth languish in detention in obscene numbers. They should be our hope for the future. We have got to take charge of the destiny of our people. And particularly our disadvantaged communities have got to be able to take power. When we say empower, we mean take power and be given the requisite power to have charge of our children and our families and our young people. I want I want to urge your support for this referendum, because it is about defining a new Australia. An Australia with its Indigenous foundations, British institutions, and our multicultural triumph. That's the story of Australia. And it's also the story of underpinning, when we have this constitutional amendment and we have the legislation and the ability to talk to the Parliament, we need the legislation to empower local communities to take charge of their children and their families and their communities. I want to say to the African communities in particular, you've got to take charge of the education of your children. It is too important to leave to the state. It is too important to just delegate it to the functionaries of the state. You have got to insist on the most effective education for your children. Because show me a juvenile in trouble and I will show you a young person who hasn't been served well by the schools they've attended. We need much more effective schooling for disadvantaged communities in particular, non-English speaking students in particular. We need an excess of opportunity for our young people. Education, employment, and business. I want to say to the African communities in particular that the empowerment agenda is as much for you as it is for our people. Yes. You need a relationship with government that empowers your people to take charge of your families, take charge of your communities, to take charge of the destiny of your young people. That is, you need to insist on better schools. You need to insist that the schools properly serve your community and your children. Otherwise, you will get turned through and you will become fodder for the sausage machines, which I can tell you have got an endless capacity to take more and more clientele. I fear in our community that without empowerment and without recognition, future leaders of First Nation communities will be talking about 60%. And in order to arrest that, my very clear advice to you as communities, my very clear advice is that the empowerment of your families and and taking charge of the destiny, getting a new relationship with government, a new accountability of government to your people, and not just being kind of pushed over into the sausage machine of the criminal justice system. So this campaign is going to be arduous and difficult. It's going to require your support. We can do it in Queensland. Queensland is very important to the referendum. But we can do it in Queensland if we get our people out to vote. We've got to turn up on the day. This is going to be a challenge more so than at a federal election. The challenge at the time of the referendum day will be to get our people out there voting and getting our young people to turn up and vote. And First Nations communities are going to rely on you, our brothers and sisters, to help us with this vote and to get the vote out. We have high levels of support from ethnic communities across the country. We have high levels of support from women, and we have high levels of support from young people. Most young people across the board, their response is, how is this even a question? And that's an indication of the Australia that lies in front of us. I think I just want to say to BENY and the Council, I'm so very pleased that this is one of my first meetings on this campaign. This community is especially close to my heart, because I want the new Australia to be an Australia of opportunity and empowerment for your future generations. This country is yours too. You know, when we finish this campaign, there'll be no question about that. You know, we'll move to an Australia where the settler idea is behind us. The settler preference is behind us. We're now all Australians, whether you're Irish, English, Nigerian, Somalian, we're all Australian. So I'm just so very pleased, BENY, for this opportunity to talk to leaders from communities here in Brisbane. I also want to say something about our Chinese community. The Australian Constitution, when it was put in place in 1901, there were provisions in the Constitution that were especially targeted at Chinese Australians, to exclude them from certain rights, including the right to vote. The race clause that currently underpins the power over our people wasn't originally an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander power. The race clause was put in order to regulate Chinese, and specifically to proscribe their citizenship. So the Australian Constitution has a long history of exclusion of people who weren't, quotation marks, settlers. We stand the best opportunity to push through into a new Australia. And I just, in closing, just want to read the words that Prime Minister Albanese has proposed will be taken to the referendum in October. There'll be a provision that reads, in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of Australia, 1, there shall be a body to be called the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice. 2, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice may make representations to the Parliament and the executive government of the Commonwealth on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And 3, the Parliament shall, subject to this Constitution, have power to make laws with respect to matters relating to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, including its composition, functions, powers, and procedures. This provision will make our Constitution so much better than it is now. It's a very important recognition that needs to happen. And so I want to be able to call upon the support of your communities in the referendum, and more than just a yes, I want your energy. I want the energy of your community and your young people to get out there, get the vote out in October, and vote yes for constitutional recognition. Thank you.
Is a question and answer, Q&A section.
This is a long project on our part. I can tell you that this is my 20th year of prosecuting this. And I've got other leaders who've been at it for decades more than me. The Constitution's like the tip of the pyramid, but the architecture of the voice and the work we need to do at the community level, we have very advanced ideas about what we want and what we need to see to empower local communities. We're very clear about how we want government to change so that it relates to our communities in a way that empowers us rather than disempowers us. And a lot of those things that concern empowerment of peoples are not unique to Indigenous people. These are things that I think need to be done for other communities, disadvantaged communities, but communities that require better service from government. A better relationship with government where your people are empowered to take charge and to take responsibility. That's the thing about power. You want to take power, you've got to take responsibility. That's what we're trying to achieve with our community, and I think we share that same struggle with other communities like your own. So as we move forward, we should have an increased conversation between First Nation communities and your communities, because these struggles are the same. We want the state to do a better job. We want the state to give us power. And we want the state to multiply the opportunities that are available to our young people. And I really think that our First Nation communities are quite a way down the track than other disadvantaged communities in thinking about what we want from government. But I can say that these are things about, creating greater opportunities, greater chances, better pathways for our young people is something that we share with your communities. And I hope that in the wake of this referendum, there'll be a conversation about, well, actually, we've got to be empowering all communities that are not getting their fair share of Australia, getting a fair go in Australia. Because we want to, we want to take a fair place in the country. That's our catch cry.
I am the President of the Queensland Multicultural Council at the moment, and I have helped put on a few citizenship ceremonies over the last few years. And our Lord Mayor has put many huge citizenship ceremonies on during this year, which means many of the new multicultural people, the newest Australians, have never voted before. And our electoral system is very important for you to know a little bit about the Australian government. We've got 3 levels of government, and it's very important, if you're going to vote, to make your vote count. Now, I'm not sure how many people have ever voted before, but what we are doing now, we are getting the Speaker of the House, Milton Deek, we're getting the ex-Speaker of the House, John McKell, and we are having a how to vote workshop. We're partnering with SSI, Settlement Services, in Woodridge, and we are going to have a workshop and a mock election. You'll be able to learn how to vote, and so that you don't do jerry votes. Jerry votes mean you haven't done something right and your vote's not counted. The most important thing for you to do, if you want to have a say to get this referendum through, is to make sure your vote counts. So we're having this workshop on the 13th of July at the Gateway, Wembley Road, Woodridge, or they call it Logan Central, at 6 o'clock till 7 o'clock. And if you can't make it there, maybe we might be able to work having one here with BENY. We're getting the Electoral Commission to help us. So it's really important that your vote counts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Betty. Thank you, Noel, for joining us. I too would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land and to recognise that the privilege that we all enjoy living on these lands came at great cost to other people, that cost continues to this day. The sovereignty's never been ceded, and that, as you heard from Uncle Noel, the impact of our privilege living on this land continues to play out in the lives of young people and all First Nations people here in Australia. And this Voice to Parliament is a step we could all be a part of in taking a step forward in redressing that and giving power and self-determination to the First Nations people of these lands on which we live, work and play and meet tonight. Very briefly, I want to tell you why a privileged white guy is standing up here as the National Multicultural Engagement Coordinator for the Yes campaign. About 13 years ago, I started an organisation called Welcoming Australia. And it started when a detention centre was opened outside of Adelaide called Inverbrackie Detention Centre. And locals in the area began to protest against the centre. But not because it was locking up innocent men, women and children who'd fled war and terror in their homelands, but because terrorists would be moving into the neighbourhood, their children would be radicalised, house prices would go down. And an image on the news was of a 10-year-old white Aussie child holding up a sign that said, "Sink the boats." And when I saw that sign, I thought, whatever you think the correct migration policy is for this country, something has gone terribly wrong in the heart of our nation when a parent can send their child out in public with that sign. What we saw at the time was our political leaders teaching us to fear our neighbours for the sake of political gain, using people for their own political purposes to to try and instill fear in our hearts of people that were different to us. At the time, it was targeting people seeking asylum. But as we moved on, it became Islamophobia, which you would remember. Peaks of Islamophobia with Reclaim Australia and others marching in our streets, and the front page, Weekend Australian, with the headline, "We'll fight Islam for 100 years." Infecting us with fear, division, all for political gain. It moved on to the African gangs narrative, which we've heard a bit about today. And what you'll see as the referendum unfolds is people again trying to turn us against our neighbour through fear, misinformation, disinformation, saying that this is going to divide Australia rather than bringing us together. And I want to say to everyone in this room, we've been here before, we've experienced it, we've seen what it does to our communities. And we need to be part of the movement that rejects the politics of fear and division and says that's not Australia, that's not us, and gets behind this campaign for the voice to Parliament. So I'm here tonight to simply invite you to be a part of it, to put your energy into it, as Noel said to us tonight. The way you can start on with the Yes 23 campaign, it's the national umbrella organisation fighting for a yes result on referendum day. There's a website. I know almost everyone here is a dignitary, as we heard earlier. So you all represent organisations. There's a website, multiculturalforvoice.org, where there's a joint resolution that more than 150 multicultural organisations have already signed up to. I encourage each of you to register your organisation there, because that website is going to become a hub for this organising of multicultural communities across Australia. We'll start emailing organisations with opportunities to host events, with translated resources, and we're also building a page there for individuals to become ambassadors for the voice in your community. Because what we know is if I post information or if I talk to my friends, it doesn't reach your communities and the people that really need to see it. We need an army of people on WeChat, we need an army of people in your WhatsApp groups, we need an army of people on your Facebook groups, speaking your languages, carrying your message and explaining why you support the voice to Parliament. So the first thing you can do, there's many more opportunities that I can share and will share through this platform, is get onto multiculturalforvoice.org and you'll start to receive information about how to get involved. Of course, visit yes23.com.au as well and you can see what the campaign's all about. There's fact sheets there and answers to all the hard questions. But in terms of organising in your communities, holding events, we're here to help, I'm here to help, and multiculturalforvoice.org is the place to start. Thank you very much.
As Habib Jamal, the Secretary of the QACC Advisory Board, and also the President of the Queensland Muslim Incorporated. He's also used to be the former President of the Islamic Council of Queensland. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Habib Jamal to move the forward stage.
Let me start by paying my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and to the elders past, present and emerging. As migrants to this great country, we are indebted to the First Nations brothers and sisters for allowing us to share their homes and resources. Many of us in this room today come from a background of some form of trauma. And there is not an iota of doubt in my mind that this trauma lives in our hearts and in our minds forever. In my personal experience, I've been out of my birth country for over 35 years, but today was an exceptionally difficult morning for me, or a difficult day. 16 June 1976, we knew it as Soweto Day. We knew it as the day when a 12-year-old Zolly Hector Pearson was shot in the streets of Soweto. As my sister Sharon said, simply for protesting the fact that we had to study Afrikaans at school, which was a language of the settler community. And if we failed Afrikaans, we failed the whole year. We had to repeat. And that protest that started the ball rolling in terms of fighting apartheid. I mean, the ANC obviously in 1902 started the struggle, but 16 June 1976 was a turning point. So, as I said, it was a difficult time. Coming back to why we are here today, our First Nations people have suffered and continue to suffer the trauma that they have lived through over the last 235 years. And as I said, that trauma never leaves you, regardless of how long you've been out of that space. Unfortunately, they are still in that space. And together, as Uncle Noel said, we all suffer the same consequences. The Voice is our opportunity to show the First Nations people that we suffer their pain and we support them in this journey and struggle. And I need every one of you here this evening to give our guest of honor an undertaking that we will support the yes vote. He has stated unequivocally that we are all Australians. So we owe it to him to support and encourage everyone in our circles to support this referendum. On behalf of QACC Advisory Board, QACC members, I say thank you to our elder, Uncle Noel Pearson, for his leadership, dedication and commitment in driving this movement. To all of you for attending this evening, and to all the volunteers that helped make this important event possible. Thank you.